Detroit, Michigan, 2010. The city was bracing for another long winter, and I was bracing for another kind of storm. They say the Army makes you a better person, but what about when it is your mission to make others better, to guide them, to challenge them, to help them find their own strength? I grew up on these streets. I roamed these neighborhoods. Never imagined I'll be back like this as a United States Army recruiter in Detroit. It wasn't exactly the homecoming I pictured. Now I faced my share of battles, multiple deployments, different times going to Korea, multiple duty stations, accompanied, unaccompanied. Any issues, challenges that the Army presents, you have to figure out a way to navigate and mitigate those challenges. But nothing prepared me for the front lines of recruiting in my home city of Detroit. See, Detroit wasn't on my list of dream duty stations, but the Army had other plans. And when those orders came down, I'll admit, I was not thrilled. I wasn't happy. But then something shifted. This was my city in a time of need. Unemployment was high, opportunities were scarce, and more importantly, I had a chance to make a difference, And there I was, December 2010, standing in my city, not just as a soldier, but a U.S. Army recruiter. The Army provided me a mission to show men and women of the city of Detroit a different path to success. It was a path to opportunity, to serve, and to create a better future. For the next 3 years, those Detroit streets became my battlefield. This is the story of what I've learned, who I've met, and the impact we made together. It's about the triumphs and the challenges, and the reasons why I'm volunteered to be a recruiter, and how Detroit in turn changed me. Now, before I dive deep into my time as a U.S. Army recruiter, I want to take you back to the decision and the reasons why I became a recruiter. So let me take you back to 2010. I was deployed, and we probably had maybe 5 or 6 months left until we rotated back to the States. Now, I was a staff sergeant, and I knew at some point I'm going to have to do something above and beyond if I want to make Sergeant First Class. It was myself. There was a Staff Sergeant Zarzar, who's about to be a Command Sergeant Major right now, and Staff Sergeant Lewis Jones, and she's a retired First Sergeant. I did episodes on those guys if you want to watch it. But anyway, we sat there and we tried to figure out what do we need to do to make Sergeant First Class? How can we progress? You got a drill sergeant, you got a recruiter, you got an instructor writer. You have to do something to separate yourself from your peers. You can't just go in, wake up, go to work, and everything is cool. You're not going to get promoted. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and volunteer for recruiting duty. I think I want to be a recruiter. I don't want to be a drill sergeant. None of that, right? So filled out the application online on the recruiter site, did everything per their recruiting checklist. Your medicals, all that stuff. You're taking your photo, everything, right? When I told my leadership that I want to volunteer for recruiting duty, there was no issue. I got all the signatures from everybody from the top on down, approving and recommending me to be a U.S. Army recruiter. Submitted the package. So let's fast forward this story. I end up getting the status, approved and everything. So now it's my time to select an assignment. So they give you, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to give us this map, and they had the whole map of the United States. And the map consisted of brigades and battalions, and you select the battalions that you want to go to. I think it was a cap on how many battalions you could select within those brigades, right? I picked New York City. I wanted to go to the recruiting station at Times Square. Philadelphia, I wanted to go there. Miami, picked Seattle. I picked Phoenix. I picked Chicago. Some other places, right? Nowhere on that list did I select Detroit. And Detroit is part of the Great Lakes Battalion. I did not want to go to Detroit. I did not select Detroit, right? Not at all. So I called a recruiter and just checking on the status. So it was a master sergeant answered the phone. I said, hey, Master Sergeant, the Staff Sergeant Anderson, just trying to figure out what's the status of my packet. She was like, oh, I'm working on yours right now. Give me a second. She got back on the phone. She said, hey, where you trying to go? And I said, Master Sergeant, I'm trying to go New York City, Philadelphia, Phoenix, L.A., Seattle, Miami, So she was like, yeah, I'm looking at your record right now. You're from Detroit, correct? And I was like, roger that, Master Sergeant. She said, okay, that's where you're going. Hung up the phone. And I'm like, oh. And I told Staff Sergeant Zarzar, he ended up going to Minnesota to recruit. And I was like, dude, they got me going to freaking Detroit. He's like, you good. That's where you from. And I'm like, no, but I don't want to go there. I didn't join the Army to go back to Detroit. That time in my life was over. I wanted something new. I had already been around the world. I didn't want to go to freaking Detroit. So I'm in Detroit. I get there, and the Detroit I grew up in was not the Detroit that I recruited in. It was a different time, and it was a challenging time. So now I got my family in Detroit. This is their first time there. And then the family that I grew up in, my mom and pops and everybody, they're there. So you're trying to balance requirements and priorities. You got Army priorities, you got family priorities and requirements, and then you got the family that raised you requirements. So you're trying to balance these three things. And also, not only you trying to balance the Army's priorities and requirements, you got to deal with civilians who presumably is going to be future soldiers. So it was a lot on my plate. And when I got there, everything was, I'm not going to throw any shots or anything because that was, 15 years ago. But I wish my time as a recruiter was more memorable. I enjoy interacting, going to the high schools, going to the colleges, going to the job fairs. I was doing everything. I had my cards. I was putting them in sneakers. I was going everywhere, trying to be the ultimate recruiter because I thought it was my job to sweep the streets that I used to roam. You know what I mean? And it was very challenging. You have people come in, they qualify, give them the pre-test, they pass it. You're getting excited as a recruiter. They go down to MEPS, they pass it. You're excited. You bring them into the Future Soldier program. You're trying to train them and this and that. And then all of a sudden they get cold feet. Well, I don't want to ship. Why you don't want to ship? Well, my girlfriend said if I leave, she's going to leave me. Dude, you're going to have many more. It is time to focus on you. Then you have people, it was so many issues. People, finding guns and all these different things I'm not going to go into. But it was a challenging time being a recruiter. But it was also a rewarding time because now I got to tell the story on what the Army did for me. And I had so much respect for the fact that, hey, this cat recruiting in Detroit, he's from Detroit. He knows our language. He's walked these streets he used to roam. He's done all these things. So I would go in the parents' house, and it was a little apprehensive. But when I started talking about I grew up here in the high schools I would go to, naming the streets and different things. So now I was like, okay, he's one of us. And it was fortunate because we had about 10 recruiters in our station. And I think 5 of us was from Detroit. So I won't say recruiting was easy because we were in Detroit and we were former, Detroit natives. But something simple as taking a shortcut to get to a certain street. Where if I had went to New York or Philadelphia, some of these other places, it would have been a struggle trying to figure out how to navigate throughout the city, especially with time constraints that the U.S. Army puts on you as it relates to recruiting, right? So it was easy. That part was easy. I grew up on the west side, so I go to the west side. I got the east side, got all these different sides of Detroit, and I understood the language. Even though I was gone for many years, I still understood what it was like to be a Detroiter, and I was honest. I didn't lie to these people because at the end of the day, me telling you a lie, I'm doing myself a disservice. I'm doing the Army a disservice. And more importantly, I'm doing you as a disservice, as the applicant, as the parent, family member, whatever. So I was honest with these people. I said, hey, the Army every day is not sunshine and rainbows. Also, the Army every day is not dark clouds and rain. It's just like any other profession. You're going to have your days where you're happy, you're excited. And you're going to have days like, why in the blank did I do this? But I was very transparent in the things that happened to me during war, during deployments and everything. Talked about the family dynamic. And I believe I achieved a great level of respect for the people that joined the Army. But, even though I didn't want to go to Detroit, when I really sit down and think about it, again, this was 15 years ago, it was a rewarding time. I got there as a staff sergeant. I ended up making sergeant first class, I think my first year in recruiting. And I don't think I made sergeant first class based off the work that I did as a recruiter because I had just started recruiting. Because I came out on the sergeant first class promotion list, like I think within that, first year I was a recruiter. Now, recruiting probably helped propel me to make master sergeant. I probably give it credit, but recruiting didn't do nothing for me making sergeant first class because I was already on the list, like I said, probably a year in. But I tell you, man, anybody that's watching this video, if you need to do something to, catapult your career, if you're stagnant, sergeant, staff sergeant, and you trying to figure out how to elevate to that next level. Drill sergeant is great. Being a recruiter is great. You're going to have to do something to separate yourself from your peers. What are your peers doing? You can go online and check to look at your CMF, career management field. I was a 92 Alpha. So I can look and see what other 92s are doing. What's the percentage of them are drill sergeants? What's the percentage of them are recruiters? So on and so forth. So you got to do that due diligence and be deliberate with your approach. But yeah, man, earning that recruiting badge. Went to recruiting school at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. It's at Fort Knox now. But it was a magical time. It was a challenging time. And that was the basis of this episode here on Military Mondays, to talk about life as a U.S. Army recruiter. Till the next time I see you, it's Mr. Anderson, host of the NomadCast Experience. See you on the next one.